Perhaps the story of the mountain runners can never be conveyed completely. For like the vast mountain itself, the details are numerous, varied, and isolated from observation. The narrative of this marvelous race of the runners, the railroad and the automobiles, and the hardships of the judges freezing at the summit, the individual experiences of the contestants on the trail strewn with confetti, striving to overcome the handicap of the great distance, and each runner threading their way through the dark woods up past the fir and cedar to meet the icy skirts of the mountain looming in the night, whose summit was just beginning to herald the early dawn. The climb, over a mile in altitude above the snowline, by the edge of deep crevasses and over steep icing slopes where a collapse or a single misstep was fraught with certain death. How could this story ever be told?
Some say to make a run at Runner's Mountain might cause a train and a bull to collide. Jackknife Harvey Haggard into a horse and buggy second place. Galbraith gloated gleefully at his fortunate victory. Poor Haggard was a miss at his stroke of bad luck, for he should have been the winner, but he lost to a dinner of grilled bull. We run the mountain for our fathers and friends. We run the forest for our sweethearts and children. Run, runner, run, let's run Runner's Mountain again. For our hometown and kin, we run the ridges for our mothers and children. Run, runner, run, let's run Runner's Mountain again. We run the mountain for our fathers and friends. We run the forest for our sweethearts and children. Run, runner, run, let's run Runner's Mountain again.
It is the summer of 1911. Howard Taft is President of the United States. An airplane lands on a ship, the USS Pennsylvania, for the first time. The Mona Lisa is stolen from the Louvre. And America's first mountain adventure race is about to begin. The race will take place in the far northwest reaches of the United States, in the city of Bellingham, Washington, situated on a bay in Whatcom County in the shadow of the North Cascades mountain range. The city, incorporated only 8 years prior, has a bustling population of 25,000 people. Where pioneers still work the land, immigrants arrive daily to start a new life. Businessmen look to make a name for themselves in this new city. The region's economy is built on the timber industry, and there is a large transient population of working men. Bellingham also has the world's largest salmon cannery. With a number of men coming and going, many businesses open to serve this working population. There are saloons, brothels. Business is good. Bellingham has another feature that most cities do not have: a mountain in its backyard. Only 31 miles away as the crow flies, known to the Coast Salish people as Comaquilshan. Mount Baker, a 10,781-foot volcanic glacial peak, dominates the landscape. named by Captain George Vancouver of the HMS Discovery after Lieutenant Joseph Baker, the first crewman to sight the icy slopes during a mapping expedition in 1792. 76 years later, in 1868, a climbing party led by Edmund Coleman, an alpinist living in Victoria, BC, reaches the summit for the first recorded time after a 2-week ascent. 5 years later, in 1873, the second ascent results in the first photograph taken on the summit of Mount Baker. This marks the dawn of mountaineering in the North Cascades.
One of the main reasons for doing the marathons was the idea that Mount Baker could be a national park. The first national park was Yellowstone in 1872. Then in 1899, Mount Rainier was made into a national park. The people in Bellingham looking at Seattle and Mount Rainier were really quite jealous. They thought if Mount Rainier can be a national park, then Mount Baker could be a national park too.
I don't know if Bellingham was searching for an identity so much as some type of event. And I think the Chamber of Commerce in particular was looking at the world fairs and knew the value of creating some kind of tourist destination, something that would be unusual. And so it had to be rather sensational. And that's how the marathon, Mount Baker Marathon, really fits in. It's a crazy event.
The first race supposedly came out of an argument as to how fast you could get from Bellingham to the top of Mount Baker and back to Bellingham again. The interesting question was, could you do it in 24 hours? No one had ever broken the 24-hour mark before.
Hugh Galbraith, a logger from Acme, Washington, was 19 years old at the time.
There was a little competition or a little rivalry between the two routes to reach the top of Mount Baker. One was by way of Glacier, and the other by way of the Deming Trail, they called it, by the Heisler Ranch. And the rivalry got quite keen, and so they got to talking about start having a race up there and see which side could get a man up to the top and back the quickest.
53-year-old attorney and avid outdoorsman Arthur J. Craven is co-founder and first elected president of the newly formed Mount Baker Club. He approaches the Chamber of Commerce with an idea to promote the mountain: a race.
The Mount Baker Club and the Chamber of Commerce come together to develop an idea to exploit the mountain. They decide that they need to have a trail system, a road, and a lodge eventually. And they want to bring tourism into the area. They really want to exploit the mountain for as much as they can get out of it. But they need to have a gimmick or a plan or something in order to entice people. So they look at the rivalry that was going on at the time between the townships of Deming and Glacier, of which would be the gateway to the mountain. And with that idea, they came up with the concept of the first Mount Baker Marathon race.
The 24-hour event will start in downtown Bellingham at 10 p.m. in front of the Chamber of Commerce. It will pit a special train carrying runners 44 miles to the town of Glacier against modified automobiles carrying runners 25 miles to Heisler's Ranch, located at the trailhead just beyond Deming. They then depart from their two modes of transportation and race by foot to the summit. The runners reach the snow line at sunrise, where they have the option to change clothes for the final push to the summit in a 32-mile round trip. Many won't take the time. On the Glacier route, the contestants run 28 miles round trip over steeper slopes before reaching the saddle of the mountain, where they merge with the Deming route for the final 1,500-foot ascent to the summit. The runners must check in with judges at established waypoints along the trail. The race is scheduled to coincide with the full moon to help illuminate the trails. The runners must reach the snow line before the sunrise thaws the snowpack, or the route becomes more treacherous. Certificates carried by the contestants will be signed by judges at the summit, where the runners will pause for a mandatory 4-minute break before heading back to the waiting autos or train. They return to Bellingham and check in at the Chamber of Commerce with their signed certificates to claim their place in the race. The prize? The Herald Cup trophy and $100 in Double Eagle gold coins. For the winning townships, bragging rights, and to be established as the official gateway to Mount Baker and the tourist trade that it will bring. "39-year-old Jack Gallatin is engineer of the Bellingham Bay and British Columbia No. 3 Special. The train, with its boilers stoked, will wait for the runners 2 blocks from the starting line at the Bellingham Depot. Gallatin and his crew strip down the engine to reduce weight and connect a passenger car behind the coal tender to prepare for the Special's run to Glacier. The town is a hamlet of about 120 people and a jumping-off point for the mines operating in the North Cascades. In the early 20th century, technology and transportation are at a turning point, and nowhere is this more evident than on the streets of Bellingham, where horse-drawn carriages and ox carts jostle for space with automobiles and trolleys.
Now Henry Jones and the pretty little queen took a ride one day in his big limousine. The car kicked up and the engine wouldn't crank. There wasn't any gas in the gasoline tank.
Back in those days, they were racing Model Ts every place in the country. You just couldn't break them down. And so my grandfather took this as an opportunity to prove that locally. And he had a group of mechanics in his shop that volunteered to strip down those cars and convert them to race cars. They would take a lot of the unnecessary stuff off of them. They'd take the fenders off, they'd take the windshield off, they'd take the lights off so that they were light and fast. It was a kind of a cloak and dagger operation. They wouldn't let people see what was going on with those cars. This is pretty top secret stuff.
Ford is going up still. When she blows out a tire, just wrap it up with wire and the little Ford will ramble right along.
His car, Betsy, was named after my grandmother, who was a fairly quiet lady, and I think that in an attempt to make her a little happier about Hugh's involvement in all this madness, he named his car the Betsy.
The automobiles in the marathon will travel on all sorts of road conditions. In the city, they travel on streets made of concrete or brick. But by the time the autos reach a short distance outside of town, they encounter something unique: a plank road.
A plank road is an actual road made of lumber. That's something that Bellingham had plenty of, was lumber that they could actually make streets out of boards. Basically a street of slivers. So it wouldn't have been comfortable. You would have hoped for some really good shocks on your buggy. And then eventually, a couple miles outside of town, it would have run into a dirt road. And then it's dirt all the rest of the way. And all kinds of dirt roads. We're talking mud, ruts, rocks, all the rest.
Well, I asked that boss for a job, just a job. He says, son, what can you do? I can pull a jack, line and track, line and track. I can pick and shovel too. Work one day, just a day. Then go lay in the shanty too.
The autos pass through Deming to reach the trailhead at Heisler's Ranch. As you travel on the dirt road that runs through Deming, you notice that the buildings lining each side of the street have wood facades and plank sidewalks. It looks like a classic Wild West town.
We're going to try and nab that person trophy for Deming, as we have 4 or 5 pretty good hikers and sort of entertain the notion that our town's going to be the proud possessor of the Herald Cup.
Once official notice of the prize money is posted, Arthur Craven and the Mount Baker Club receive applicants from all over the region. Not to be outdone by one another, both Deming and Glacier post their own contestants, hardy young men looking for a challenge. Some sign up to represent their townships, others just want a diversion from their daily routine. The runners come from many backgrounds and professions. There are mountain men and coal miners, Hugh Galbraith, a logger, Frank Bottiger, tree faller, Tom Kelly, a farmer and wrestler. Other runners include a bed spring maker, a postman, a milk inspector, and an insurance salesman. Harvey Haggard is a young mule packer from the Polson Mines. Coal miners Joseph Frankovitz and Norman Randall. 28-year-old Clayton Wright, a farmer and mountain guide. John Magnuson, a timber cruiser. And Stanley Gilday, a student. And a young logger and homesteader from Texas, 29-year-old John Turner Riddle, thinks his chances are as good as anyone's.
He was very athletic. He looked like a runner. He made his living in the woods. He was a mountain man. Turner and his brother-in-law Clarence would think nothing of walking into Bellingham to get a 50-pound sack of flour and walk back home with it so their wives could make bread. I don't think Turner would have ran for the money. I think Turner would have more than likely done it because he could.
Hugh Galbraith and his brother Joe know the $100 prize would be a great help to the family. Their father, a local constable and judge, is murdered by bandits only months before the race.
I'm sure he probably read that they were going to have it in the newspaper, and he was very familiar with Mount Baker. Having been a ranger, he knew exactly every direction to get to the top of it. I'm sure that he just decided when he saw that that would be something he would enjoy doing.
He made $5 a month. And he rode a rickety bicycle, apparently even without tires, to Bellingham over very rutty roads and to get to high school.
Daddy graduated in 1903, and in 1902, his high school team won the state championship. They had the flying wedge, they called it, when he played. And they all lined up in a wedge and went right through the line until so many people were injured that they made that not a legal play. But he did like to watch our football games, except that he did feel like they were very wimpy and that they had to wear all the padding and things that he did not wear when he played football. So.
I said it was like lawn tennis. No.
The potential contestants sign up at the Mount Baker Club, as Arthur Craven extols.
Anybody with a tenth of a drop of sporting blood in him cannot fail to enthuse over the prospect of this race. It is going to be the most exciting event of the sort ever pulled off on the Pacific Coast, or as far as I know, in the United States. These fine young fellas are all husky, healthy young men, all in prime condition, and the man who wins will be entitled to all the glory and all the honor we can accord him.
The runners soon find themselves on the front page of newspapers and the cover of magazines. They're the guests of honor at social functions. These young wrestlers, loggers, and bed spring makers are celebrities. August 9th, 1911. The streets throughout downtown seem deserted, as the people and cars usually found on the avenues congregate in front of the Chamber of Commerce and along the race route as the hour of 10 p.m. approaches. All along the route, from Bellingham to the trailheads, thousands of spectators wait for the train and autos to pass in hopes of catching a glimpse of the runners on their way to the summit.
For the local population, at least, they had never seen anything like it. They'd never had a community celebration like this, or a community event of this size. Part of the attraction was these automobiles, which were still a unique thing. I mean, these were unusual. People hadn't seen a lot of automobiles. And to see them go fast, that's really even better.
This was a race that was between men and their endurance, and then also between contrivances. I mean, between the railroad and the automobile. And the automobile was a new thing on the scene, and it was competing with the railroad and all across the transportation front. So here was an opportunity for them to go head-to-head in this deal.
– 14 runners ready themselves to either climb into their automobiles or dash 2 blocks to the number 3 special. The cars wait at the starting line for their passengers as the drivers of the Baby 40, the Betsy, Hugh Deal's modified Model T, and a Buick Phaeton don their dusters and driving goggles in preparation for the dash over dirt and rock roads.
Gentlemen, the task before you is a daunting one. You'll climb aboard your chosen method of transportation to your respective trailheads in the competing townships of Deming or Glacier, where you will run 32 miles afoot to the summit of Mount Baker and return. May God speed you all.
At the drop of a hat, the race is on.
The automobiles start with a loud bang, and their unmuffled exhaust spits flames. Frightened children clutch the skirts of their mothers. Strong-voiced farmer lads cheer. Buxom country maids shriek. The supercharged atmosphere is intense as the cars flash past. Just moments later, the glacier-bound runners board the train. Within moments, the engine hisses loudly and chugs hard. The powerful vibration moves through the train, followed by the sound of squealing steel wheels. The repetitive sound of the engine increases, and it becomes louder as the train moves away faster and faster. It passes so quickly that all that can be seen or heard of her sounds like an echo dying away into the darkness and distance. Jack Sparks, Bellingham Herald.
The cars jockey for position and try to keep away from the debris being thrown up by the lead vehicle. Many of the cars have the floorboards removed to save weight. The drivers and passengers use foot pegs and leather straps to keep from falling out as they watch the dirt, ruts, and rocks pass under their feet. Some cars miss corners and find themselves smashing through corn stalks in the middle of fields. One of the autos hits a pothole at full speed, tearing its frame in half. The runners, though uninjured, are knocked out of the race. It's a long walk back to Bellingham.
These people were on the edge of disaster. During the early days of automotive industry and the Model T days, what you don't read much about is all the people that were killed on the road because those cars didn't make it around the corner or they ran into each other. They were daredevils. I don't know that they really understood the dangers that they were putting themselves into. I think the people who ran to the top of Mount Baker and back put themselves in more danger than the drivers of those vehicles.
Back at the Chamber of Commerce, the crowd is eager to hear news of the racers' progress. As the train passes through small towns and hamlets on the way to the trailhead, spotters call the chamber with their clock times. The train, unencumbered by its normal load, travels at full steam at over 65 miles an hour. At 10:27 p.m., the first train report from Sumas comes in. How fast is she going is the question. An operator in Sumas replies, I don't know, but she's going like hell. Passengers on the number 3 special feel as if the train is floating on air between the rail and the wheel as it passes through Kendall and nears Glacier. The speeding automobiles thread their way through the woods toward Heisler's Ranch, where trail judges wait to record their arrival times. It is 10:54 p.m. when Joe Galbraith, riding in Hugh Deal's Model T Betsy, reaches Heisler's Ranch in the trailhead, almost an hour after the start of the race. The other cars and racers are just moments behind. In Glacier, the Special's headlamp comes into view, and the train lets out a long whistle as it pulls into the station. A crowd forms around the platform as sparks fly from the Special's brakes. At 11 p.m. sharp, Harvey Hayward and the other runners on the train disembark and disappear into the darkness of the trail to the yells of, "For the glory of Glacier, boys!"
How do you know your pace when you're running up a mountain and it's the first time that you've ever done it? So my guess is they were trying to keep up with people, not knowing whether or not those were people they could really keep up with. Because you could never really train to do that race over and over again. It's easy to know what your pace is when you're on flat ground and you're doing 26.2 miles. It would be a lot harder to know in that elevation, on that terrain. Some of them probably wore themselves out before they were halfway up.
These runners were quite naive in what they probably did to get themselves ready for this great run. Looking at the pictures can give you a feel of just how tired some of these runners must have been.
These guys were farmers and coal miners and loggers. These occupations gave them this skill set that they would need to move effectively in the mountains. They were used to being outside. They were used to moving over uneven terrain. They were used to walking on logs and moving up and down steep slopes. Their occupations also gave them the foundation of physical fitness that they needed in a way that made them competitive in the race.
I think these guys who ran the Mount Baker Marathon were unbelievable. I don't see how they could do it. I don't see how they did it. That you could do what is essentially a marathon up a mountain, gaining that many thousands of feet at night in a storm. It just blows my mind. I can't imagine doing it.
I think they did it the same way that I do it. They tapped into, this survival instinct, that basically this primitive DNA that we all have, that we can get through tough, difficult situations. And I think that's really what sport is about. It's what being in the mountains is all about. It's about surviving.
I think it's one of those things that as a contestant in the race on Mount Baker, it's actually to your benefit to know less. Because the more you know about the mountain, probably the more worried you're going to be.
On one hand, you have sheer novices going up a mountain like Mount Baker, completely unprepared, no weather forecasts, in many cases never having climbed a mountain or been on a glacier, and they're just going for it. But I think what we forget is these people were pioneers.
Joe Galbraith runs nearly non-stop along the Deming Trail. At 11:39 p.m., before he crosses the Nooksack River, Joe heads to the cabin of Forest Ranger Carl Bell. Bell receives him at the cabin door, helping the runner inside. He offers him a cup of coffee, while Mrs. Bell serves up eggs and bacon. Joe thanks the Bells for their hospitality and requests that, in fairness, all climbers on the Deming Trail be treated with equal consideration. Mrs. Bell responds with her intent to do so, keeping hot coffee at the ready and food prepared for each runner as they come through.
I think, that renegade aspect, that free-form nature, that there were no rules, really. There's very few rules for this event, makes it, really true wild mountain running.
as you go through, as you get into the harder aspects of the event, when it gets more challenging and the physical demand becomes even harder, you actually simplify your life even more. You simplify the task even more. What do I need to do to keep moving forward? What do I need to eat? What do I need to drink? Do I stop at the ranger station and have a breakfast of bacon and eggs and coffee, or do I push through because this guy's right on my tail and I think I can do it without that nutrition? Just focusing on one step at a time, solving the questions of now, where part of the event is allowing your mind to deal with life and process the issues that you're going through. But then part of the event is the focus on the now and how do I get from point A to point B and then maybe back down to point C.
These guys probably weren't thinking a lot of strategy. They were just in the moment, which I think is really the true aspect of the sport. Being in the moment, you know, running with people, having a social element, but also being, you know, kind of drawn in and realizing, okay, how's my body feeling? You know, not worried about other competitors. But in the end, those other competitors help push you just a little bit further.
Days prior to the race, summit judges and trail guards establish camps along the routes. There is a determined effort to prevent any form of cheating by documenting the runners' times. The rules allow runners to invite family members and friends to support them at the timberline with fresh clothes, food, and the option of running as a companion. It is daybreak. Joe Galbraith reaches Mazama Park, where his brother Hugh is waiting to help him prepare for his run to the summit.
I was right in amongst the thing, right in the middle of it. Well, this race, there was quite a bunch of us camped up at what was known then as Mazama Lake, and it was right at the edge of the snow line going up to Mount Baker. And when my brother got up there that morning, why, we gave him some coffee and little refreshments. And then the funny part of it was, in that picture there at our camp, while Joe was there, his two competitors in the race came up and we fed them and took care of them just as we did at Joe. It just so happened that they were good friends of ours and we were well acquainted with them, and naturally we'd help them out all we could.
I couldn't imagine running in those boots. I mean, the crampons we wear today are quite a bit longer. The boots are flexible, which would make it harder to kick into the snow. So cold, so thin. I honestly can't imagine wearing those things up that mountain.
I can see how you could hike in these, but to run, it's pretty strong.
Poor bastards. I couldn't imagine running 30 miles in these. That would just be horrible.
They're probably guessing at the right way to run a race like this. They're doing whatever they need to do in order to get up that mountain. They're probably running some of it and walking some of it, stopping to get their breath now and again to take in some fuel. They're probably having panic attacks on the way if they're not professional runners. My guess is that they get pretty scared because the only way down is the way they came.
It's high stakes. I think that the contestants in this race were definitely placing themselves in harm's way if they didn't know what they were getting into and had no experience on a glacier. You can run for 15 miles through the woods, up through the foothills to the base of the glacier, but it's very different from running a marathon once you get to that glacier.
The runners who were going up the Deming route likely had significantly steeper terrain. The Deming itself is steep, and they would have had to go around a significant crevasse field. If they go to the right, it's a half mile to a mile. If they went to the left, they might have been able to contour up onto those slopes and get around on the left, which would have been faster. And they had to check in with the judges at the saddle. The Deming side would have been a more difficult side to run on. The Deming runners, they definitely had the short end of the stick.
The runners begin their final push up the glacial face of the mountain to the summit, the most strenuous and dangerous part of the race.
I'm rather impressed with not only the amount of elevation change, but that it was all in one push and that they're up at elevations of 8, 9, 10,000 feet, where the body starts to experience changes because there's less oxygen for the muscles to utilize while they're still pushing hard and trying to reach the summit.
The altitude isn't going to play that big of a role in a speed ascent like this because you're going to gain and lose that elevation quickly, but it's an added strain for sure.
You probably did have times of physical breakdown, and then at that point you just have to rely on your resolve to carry you through. A lot of it, how well they did, would just have to do with what's here, what's in their head, rather than what's in their bodies.
There's a point where you give up on your expectations. You realize that you're at the end of your rope, you're at the end of your resources, your mind is exhausted, and you surrender. You say, whatever happens here happens. And in that, there's a release of new energy.
Humans have been always looking for a way of testing themselves against elements, against nature. And this was half survival and half a race against time.
At 5:37 a.m., Joe Galbraith arrives on the summit in a snowstorm with winds reaching 70 miles an hour, 7.5 hours after the hat was dropped in downtown Bellingham. He is surprised to find out he has just missed Harvey Haggard, who arrived on the summit and departed back toward Glacier just 19 minutes before. Galbraith registers his signature in the judge's book, and Davis signs Joe's certificate carried in an oilskin pouch around his neck. J.W. Collins, Davis's right-hand man, hands Galbraith a cup of hot coffee. Joe waits at the top of Mount Baker for the mandatory 4 minutes imposed by the marathon rules, his bare arms, legs, and head exposed to the elements. At 5:41 a.m., as the judges shout words of encouragement, Joe begins the second half of the race.
We found, much to our surprise, that Mr. Haggard had already been there and gone. So we thought, well, we'll be second in the race. The Glacier Way is going to win out. But when we started back down, why, Joe seemed to get a lot more life into him, a lot more pep. And when he got back down to where we were camped, and he made it right on through in flying colors, just as full of pep as he was when he started.
Daddy said it was a difficult race, that he was tired. I remember one time he said, right when he was on his way down, he got down on his knees and says, God, you're going to have to help me.
You gotta get a feeling how the run's going, and you can tell if everything's going smoothly and it's going to plan. You got the tailwind and you're just nailing it, and your body's rested and it feels good and you're charging, versus you crash through the ice and then you put on track spikes and it's above freezing and you can't get any purchase because it's all mush, and then somebody stole your stuff. All of a sudden it starts adding up and you're like, geez, you know. My rule of thumb is 3 things go wrong, you run away.
Out of the 14 runners to start the race, Joe Galbraith, John Magnuson, and Turner Riddle make it down the Deming side. Harvey Haggard and Norman Randall make it down the Glacier side. The others have dropped out of the race, many before reaching the summit. Of these 5 remaining runners, only 4 will finish. The runners are breaking all estimated times, catching trail judges completely off guard as they come down the mountain. They are dehydrated, delirious, and at times incoherent. The runners know they have reached the final leg of the race, and yet they extend themselves beyond their limit.
Something clicks. You see the reality, whether it's somebody coming up behind you or the finish line comes into sight. There's this other ability that takes over, and I can't imagine what they're doing, knowing that when they finish the running part of the event, then they have to get on a train and get to the next finish line.
There was only one train to come back on. What the rule said was the train would stay there 1 minute after the first runner had arrived.
I can't see the first runner yet, but he's coming off the trail towards the train.
Any other runners who made it to the train within 1 minute of the leader would be on board, and all be on board for the run back to Bellingham. If you didn't get there within 1 minute, well, you were out of the picture unless you could find some other way to get down. The train left without you, and you were just stuck in Glacier.
At 9:01 a.m., Harvey Haggard and Norman Randall come off the trail at Glacier, traveling a 28-mile round trip to the summit of Mount Baker in 10 hours and 1 minute, a feat few thought possible. A crowd gathers when Haggard and Randall scramble off the trail and emerge from the forest. Randall is on Haggard's heels down the trail, but he can't keep up. Drained of all energy, Randall is tapped out and ends his race in Glacier as he watches the train and Haggard depart without him. On the other side of the mountain, Galbraith sees the trailhead in sight. As he approaches, he borrows a verse from Sir Walter Scott's Highland Gathering and makes it his own.
Speed, Malay, speed! The trail is past. Heisler's house appears at last, and peeps like moss grown rocks half seen, half hidden in the copse of green. There mayst thou rest, thy labor done. Hugh Deal and Betsy shall speed thee on.
Joe arrives at Heisler's ranch at 9:40 a.m. after a 32-mile round trip to the summit, almost 12 hours exactly from the time he left Bellingham. With an overcoat and goggles for the trip, he climbs in Betsy and speeds through Deming for Bellingham and the finish line. Galbraith will later say, "It was the most terrifying ride of his life." Haggard is in first place aboard the number 3 special. His team lifts him onto a makeshift table, strips him of his soiled clothes, and begins rubbing him down. Gallatin, with throttle wide open, is speeding down the rails at 65 miles an hour, rounds a bend, and suddenly sees a big Red Bull standing on the track. With only seconds to react, he pulls on the whistle cord to warn his passengers. In the rear carriage car, Haggard hears that whistle scream, and everything goes topsy-turvy. Haggard, still undressed, emerges from the wreckage.
I'm all right, but I'm afraid I've lost the race.
The conductor attaches a phone to the train's private line and calls ahead to Maple Falls, asking for a saddle horse to be made ready. A local farmer on horse and carriage rushes over and offers help. Harvey still has a chance if he can get to Kendall, where an automobile will take him to Bellingham. Worried that the open ride will chill the depleted runner, a bathrobe is given to Haggard for the trip. For the club's executive committee, it appears a calamity and a media nightmare are about to unfold. But as the regional papers sensationalize the wreck, the would-be disaster turns into the best PR stunt the club could have hoped for. 3 men reported dead, including Gallatin, but in reality, no one is killed, except for the big Red Bull. The carriage takes Haggard to Maple Falls, where a horse named Buster waits to carry him several miles to Kendall Crossing, the nearest drivable road. Harvey isn't known for his horsemanship, nor Buster for his patience. At Kendall Crossing, Haggard makes his transfer for the last leg of the journey, only to have his car break down several times after slamming into potholes along the way. Harvey later describes his journey as a blur, a whirling dream, a moving picture show run amok. In Bellingham, the crowd roars as Joe Galbraith and Hugh Deal speed into town. Joe, shaken from the ride, stumbles out of the car and takes the last leg of the journey to the top floor of the Chamber of Commerce. Exhausted, delirious, and euphoric, Joe has to be reminded that his certificate needs to be presented and the official record book signed before he can be declared the winner.
You have to register over here, sir.
In a time of 12 hours and 28 minutes, Joe Galbraith is the champion of the 1911 Mount Baker Marathon.
Mr. Galbraith, congratulations. You are the first winner of the Mount Baker Marathon.
Just minutes behind Galbraith, Harvey Haggard arrives. As his machine roars down Magnolia Street, Haggard yells for his driver to pull over, in fear that the crowd will surround them. He jumps out and sprints down the street to the chamber office, still wearing his bathrobe. Harvey Haggard's trials and tribulations during the race make headlines. He survives a train wreck, a buggy and horse ride, and a detour in a speeding automobile, all for second place. To Harvey Haggard, the mule packer from the Polson mine, second place isn't first, but he's happy to be alive.
After the first race, there were days and nights of celebrations, the last of which was a giant barbecue. And on the menu, the big red bull who had derailed the Glacier Route Haggard train.
So this first year was a real success. Nobody else is doing anything remotely like this, and it's a testimony to the remarkable stamina and toughness and courage of the men of this region. So they planned to do it again in the summer of 1912.
It is 1912. The Titanic sinks in the North Atlantic. Explorer Robert Falcon Scott perishes during an expedition to the South Pole, and in Bellingham, the Chamber of Commerce begins an aggressive campaign to raise funds for a second marathon. Henry Engberg, is a local pharmacist who always seems to be outshined by his 19-year-old wife, Madame Davenport Engberg, a virtuoso violinist and the first woman in the United States to conduct her own orchestra. It is now Henry's turn to be in the spotlight as the newly elected president of the Mount Baker Club. Engberg plans to make his mark by expanding the marathon into a 3-day celebration and to raise the first place prize to $500, which attracts competitors from Boston, Canada, and California. He introduces a new marathon logo, the Mount Baker Goat. J.J. Donovan, railroad baron and lumber tycoon, is a supporter of the Chamber of Commerce and the Mount Baker Marathon. His status in the community and desire to promote business in the region attracts investors to Engberg's cause. The club arranges for the U.S. fleet to anchor in Bellingham Bay so that people can tour the famous warships. There is no shortage of new festivities. Motorboats race on the lake, parades fill the streets, and a circus attracts huge crowds. Parachute jumps and hot air balloon rides are offered, and many see an airplane fly overhead for the first time in their lives. A group of citizens, drivers, and shopkeepers confront the race committee about safety concerns. The group wants to move the automobile race outside the city in fear of speeding autos crashing through storefronts or into the crowd. They are met with derision by the race committee.
You care more about the race than those in it, and you won't be happy until someone's dead.
You don't drive, we'll find red-blooded men who will.
Subsequently, the public is barred from future committee meetings. The event will go on as planned. Joe Galbraith, the previous year's champion, makes headlines when he breaks his arm and shoulder in an auto accident while training and counts himself out of the competition. Joe's brother Hugh decides to go in his place. The time for the race nears, and over 20,000 spectators crowd the streets. However, a storm is brewing on the mountain. When summit judges Nathan Davis and J.W. Collins reach the snow line, they realize the weather conditions are far too dangerous to send runners up the slopes. Davis concludes that the race must be stopped.
Davis knows his decision to halt the race is not going to be taken lightly back in Bellingham by the executive committee. He and Collins head off the mountain, and on their way down, they run into Ranger Carl Bell. They explain to him the situation that they're facing on the mountain. Carl decides, I need to go into town with these guys and help support their cause. They head into Deming, and once they get there, they run into Joe Galbraith, the previous year's winner. And they solicit his help to come into town also. Once they're about ready to take off, Davis realizes there's no judges on the mountain and Engberg is not going to be a happy man. So he jumps out of the car and runs into the hotel and tells the switchboard operator, call into town and let the executive committee know they're not on the mountain and they're on their way in.
As in the previous year, the race is scheduled to start at 10 p.m. But at 5 p.m. in the Chamber of Commerce rooms, Engberg and the Mount Baker Club's executive committee are in a state of denial. Reporters, investors, promoters, and citizens corner board members, asking what is to become of the race. Then, shocking word from Deming, the judges are on their way back to Bellingham. The committee is flabbergasted. The club members become nervous. Are they courting disaster? If so, the blame may lie at their feet. Davis and Collins enter the committee meeting room. with Ranger Carl Bell and Joe Galbraith.
It's the trail. It is completely buried in snow. And the judges are standing in my office.
The reception is as cold as they expected.
At this very moment.
Engberg is angry. Nothing Davis says seems to make an impression.
Just give up? It's all costing money. Money that we don't have unless we pull this off. It is costing the city its reputation. Not to mention my own.
Your reputation? If you start men up that mountain now, you're sending them to their deaths. It's
suicide.
Joe Galbraith stands before the executive committee with one arm raised and a plaster cast.
If you would lay $5,000 in my hand to climb that mountain tonight, I would not go. To try it would be worse than suicide.
Engberg's decision will seal the fate of the Mount Baker Marathon.
Let me make something perfectly clear so there is no mistake. When this race resumes, it will not again be halted. The runners will run up that mountain regardless of weather or trail conditions. Neither I nor the committee gives a damn if it takes them 3 days. They will run up that mountain. Mr. Davis, you will make preparations to stay on the summit for a week, longer if necessary. This city will not be seen by the rest of the country to be some backwater hicks in some jerkwater town who can't pull off a simple race. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Go on. Leave.
The official postponement is not announced until after 9 p.m., just 1 hour before the scheduled start of the race. Postponing the marathon is a heavy blow for those invested. The city is filled to capacity, more than doubling the number in attendance from last year. Headlines in the morning papers read as if the Mount Baker Club has saved the day, averting a near disaster. Committee refuses to send men to death.
Engberg knows for every day the race is delayed, visitors and their money are leaving the city. He has to start the race to avoid financial ruin.
Fortunately, as the day of the race dawns, the weather clears, and the judges once again head for the summit, but this time, prepared for any weather conditions that might arise.
As a simple matter of fact, when you ascend 10,000 feet, you can expect the temperature is going to be approximately 35 degrees Fahrenheit lower than it would be at sea level. And so if the temperature is 70 degrees at sea level, it could be 35 degrees at the summit of Baker, and that doesn't even count the wind. They would have been at the mercy of the weather.
I've climbed Mount Baker between 50 and 70 times. Yeah, I've had days on the summit that were perfectly calm and sunny and pleasant. And I've had days that were brutally cold where you were just trying to get out of there before you lost fingers and toes to frostbite. And a windy, cold night on the summit of Mount Baker for those judges 100 years ago would have been pretty rough duty up there.
The first year of the races, accommodation for judges were not very good. The judges had practically frozen to death when they were there. So for the second race, they decided to have better accommodation. A canvas and metal structure was built on the very top of Mount Baker that was big enough to hold 6 people.
Camping on the summit can be a very pleasant experience, or it can be a very, very, very unpleasant experience. If you have a snow shelter, it's probably going to be more pleasant because high winds will be buffeted by that more easily than a tent will. The wind conditions on top of Mount Baker are commonly 40, 50 miles an hour, often 60 miles an hour or more. It can be Arctic up there. It can be like Denali, honestly, and it's serious up there, very serious, especially for people who aren't prepared properly for those conditions, which back then nobody was.
One of the disadvantages of the first year's race was that once the racers left the train or cars on the route to the top of Mount Baker and back, nobody had any idea where they were or who was ahead during that part of the race. In the second year, they laid telephone wires way up the mountain so they could have stations and relay back to Bellingham how the racers were doing and who was ahead.
9 runners, including Harvey Haggard in his second bid for first place, start the race. Turner Riddle, John Magnuson, and Joe Frankoviz also return to try for the $500 purse. Hugh Galbraith finds himself in Betsy too, speeding toward Deming just like his brother the year before. His cousin Victor Galbraith joins the race as well.
Yeah, I was going to run this. I did get out as far as the Heisler Ranch in one of the Betsy's, the little Ford cars they took, but riding around those sharp turns and stopping and starting quick, it made me seasick. I got so sick I just simply couldn't go any further. That was all there was to it. So I quit.
Lead judge Nathan Davis snaps a photograph of John Magnuson as he takes his mandatory break at the summit, the only known image of a runner at the peak. The runners break all trail times set by the previous year's contestants by over 2.5 hours. Harvey Haggard, his second chance on the Glacier Trail, comes down the mountain in first place and climbs aboard the number 3 special. Harvey Haggard, whose run-in with the bull left him struggling for second place the year before, is now champion of the 1912 Mount Baker Marathon. But the race is far from over.
And there were huge, huge crowds. And they would wait all night long for reports. Nobody went to bed. The automobile races they had was the Baby 40 and the Betsy 1 and 2 and the National and several other cars. They would come down that stretch of Elk Street with flames spurting out of the adjusted tubes that stuck out of the sides of the cylinders at a speed of 72 miles an hour, which in that day was considerable. I happened to see as he skidded, he lost control, his brakes had gone out, and he came around the corner there there was a vacant lot with some cordwood piled alongside and a big crowd in front of it, and he plowed right into that crowd, losing control of it, and it looked to be a very bad accident. One was quite badly hurt.
The worst fears of the store owners come true. A.A. Rogers, a Civil War veteran, is hit by a car. He's taken to his home and then by ambulance to the hospital. Though gravely injured, he survives. Harvey Haggard is awarded the $500 prize, and news of the marathon is reported in papers from coast to coast. The race generates so much interest that the Mount Baker Club and Chamber of Commerce believe they finally have a formula for success. It is August of 1913. Europe is on the brink of war. Woodrow Wilson is the new president of the United States. And the Mona Lisa is recovered in Italy. The Mount Baker Club has a new president, Raymond Green. The race festivities are now expanded. The Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus is in town for the celebration, and more than 20,000 spectators travel to the city by boat and train to watch the race.
There was a lot at stake in 1913. The Mount Baker Club wanted to make this the biggest marathon yet, and in doing so, they were gambling. They were spending far more money than what they had coming in, and their expenses far exceeded their banking accounts.
This year, the marathon will start on August the 16th at 5:30 in the morning to give the crowd a better chance to see the race. But unfortunately, the earlier starting time will also add to the dangerous trail conditions faced by the runners on the mountain. Proven that the glacier route is the fastest, the race is changed to even the odds. The runners will travel by train or auto to the mountain, and once they reach the summit, will return by opposite trail and mode of transportation. Each runner will travel by train, by foot, and by auto. Once again, bad weather assaults the mountain, and another storm is brewing between Nathan Davis and Raymond Green. Davis, stationed on the mountain at the snow line, calls Green at the chamber.
The storm is upon us, and it's not letting up. I have to advise you to postpone the race. Do not send the runners. It is not safe. What are your instructions?
You stand fast, Mr. Davis. We're aware of the situation. We're just as concerned for the runners as you are. We'll advise you in the morning. A lot can change in 24 hours.
Green did not want to have a debacle like Ingberg had in 1912. He was going to gamble. He was going to gamble that the weather was going to break, and he was willing to gamble on the lives of his runners. He was going to start the race on schedule no matter what.
The morning of the race, Davis, weathering the storm at Mazama Park, assumes his plea to postpone has been heeded. He and his fellow judges pack up their camps. But back in Bellingham, confusion among the race officials and investors' resistance to postpone override fears for the safety of the runners. The race starts, and 14 runners unknowingly speed toward the storm. The officials on the glacier side have already left their camp. On the Deming side, Davis and his men are heading off the mountain when they are shocked to see a mud-covered Paul Westerland, a professional runner from California, advancing up the trail toward them. Davis tells the man to go only as far as the saddle of the mountain, an area 1,500 feet below the summit. He is told, do not attempt to summit under any circumstances. With no judges on the other side of the mountain, the glacier runners continue on to the summit, just missing the Deming runners coming down from the saddle. Millard Burnside, a local mountain man, forced to run without his pet bear, is the first to reach the summit. 3 more runners soon follow. Confused, they call out for the judges, search the area, but can find no one to report to. Burnside decides to end his bid and to stay behind to assist any others who reach the summit. The last runner to leave Burnside is Victor Galbraith, cousin of Joe Galbraith, the champion of the 1911 marathon.
When you're on the summit area of Mount Baker and the clouds come in, it's very difficult to tell which way is which because everything slopes away. So it's hard, you think you're going back the direction you came from, but you could be off just a couple of degrees, and as you get a little lower, it pulls you a little more to the side. You can go off completely the opposite side of the mountain, and this happens. That's how people get lost.
Victor Galbraith, alone, as he comes down the mountain, takes an impulsive shortcut.
You go from being on the surface to just being in this black pit you can't get out of. Victor Galbraith knocked himself out for a little while, and then he had to come to and deal with this environment. That's a tough guy.
From probably the most dangerous perspective, potentially icefall could come down and hit you. It can be drippy, spindrift coming down, snow coming down. Galbraith being at the bottom of a crevasse for 5 hours is pretty bad. Especially the fact that he was injured, nobody knew where he was. His life expectancy was honestly less than 5 hours.
The other runners didn't even notice he was missing. He tried to keep warm and active by running back and forth.
The bottom of a crevasse is like a refrigerator. And, if you're dressed light for a quick ascent and descent, and you're stuck inside of a refrigerator for 4 to 6 hours, your chances of survival, if not found, are very limited. If he didn't have any safety equipment to get out of there, he's popsicle material. Yeah, I mean...
My dad and my Uncle Odd heard that he had fallen in the crevasse. They sent a team to follow his trail up to the top of the mountain, a rescue team. And they told my Uncle Odd they were going, and he said, well, I'm going to just start right up through here because I think I can get there more quickly than following his trail. He and my dad, in fact, started right up and went straight to where my cousin was. They saw where his tracks had gone down into the crevasse, and my uncle yelled, Victor, and he said, Odd, old boy, is that you? He said it sounded like the voice of angels. He thought he was dead. He had been in there for a long time, and he was probably at that point almost unconscious. They put ropes down and pulled him out.
He's lucky he survived, and he's lucky people found him, because there's no way you can really live for very long in that environment when you're not very well equipped and not very well prepared.
He was brought by improvised toboggan back down the mountain. Newspaper articles said he had cuts and bruises, but perhaps the problems were worse. Years later, his family said he was still suffering from problems related to the fall.
The rest of the runners continue the race. As they come off the Deming Trail, many of the runners are so disoriented and delirious that they run past their waiting automobiles. The drivers are forced to herd their runners and even lash some of them to their seats before starting back to the city. Huge crowds await the runners back in Bellingham. The first through the chamber door is Paul Westerlin, the runner who traversed the saddle. The poor condition of the returning runners is obvious. It is not long before Nathan Davis and the contestants tell the story of a botched race and of a runner lost in a crevasse.
I can only say, hereafter get someone else to act as judge on the mountain. I am done.
The marathon is won in a record time of 9 hours and 39 minutes. But who actually won the race? Is it Paul Westerland who crossed the saddle to finish first? Or is it John Magnuson who reached the summit only to arrive in Bellingham in third place, 3.5 hours behind Westerland? The Mount Baker Club offers a take-it-or-leave-it deal. Barroom brawls break out over which township should be declared the winner, and the runners demand their awards.
If those summit contestants make trouble, I'll award the prizes to the saddle runners. I will not change my ruling.
Everything that could go wrong in 1913 did. The people were disappointed with the race. The Mount Baker Club was financially strapped. Runners were protesting the results of the race, and to make things worse, newspapers were calling the marathon human horse races.
J.J. Donovan writes an open letter to the newspaper.
A third marathon is over, and no runner is killed. A fourth may not be so lucky. It is time to stop.
Without the financial support from Bellingham's affluent society, the Mount Baker Marathon is bankrupt. The town of Glacier, seizing an opportunity to be crowned gateway to the mountain, announces a race for blood, doubling the marathon purse to an astonishing $1,000 to settle once and for all who is the real winner of the 1913 marathon. 2 runners are willing to take up the challenge. Paul Westerland, who feels he needs to defend his name and title, and Millard Burnside, who abandoned the race at the summit. Burnside declares that if he had not chosen to freeze on the summit, he would have won the race. The other contestants are too bitter and disillusioned. They refuse to compete. In the early hours of August 31st, 1913, the number 3 special, the train that had delivered runners to Bellingham, now delivers spectators to Glacier. The Sumas Marching Band plays to a crowd of 1,500 people who surround the trailhead to witness the historic event. Not only does Paul Westerland win the match, he also breaks all previous trail records with a staggering time of 6 hours and 2 minutes. Millard Burnside limps in 37 minutes later. It will prove to be the last time the finish line is crossed in a Mount Baker marathon.
It would have continued if the management had been good all the way through. A great deal of the trouble that closed those marathons was the fact that people were afraid of subjecting these runners to such great hardships. So it could have been kept just the same as an annual event, which would have drawn tremendous crowds.
Well, the first race or two, they didn't care whether they had any money or not. They weren't interested in the money part of it. They were just interested in getting up to Mount Baker and back the quickest. It was a big event, and it continued to be a big event for 2 or 3 years until it began to get commercialized, and professional racers came up here, and then, well, my cousin fell in a crevice, and other different things happened, and interest kind of died out, and they just dropped it, that's all.
More than a century has passed since the mountain runners attempted to conquer the summit. Their names and faces have faded with time. For every man who succeeded, there were far more who failed. And still, the mountain, Coma Quilshan, beckons.
say to make a run at Runner's Mountain might cause a train and a bull to collide. Jackknife Harvey Haggard into a horse and buggy second place. Galbraith gloated gleefully at his fortunate victory. Poor Haggard was a miss at his stroke of bad luck, for he should have been the winner, but he lost to a dinner of grilled bull. We run the mountain for our fathers and friends. We run the forest for our sweethearts and children. Run, runner, run, let's run Runner's Mountain again. Say to make a run at Runner's Mountain might bring a miner or a lumberjack to tears, or even a blizzard in August blowing biting chill and snow. The city threw a festival to welcome the runners. The governor gave a grand speech to the people who showed. After the blizzard, the racers in their Model Ts did go. We run the mountain for our lovers and kin. We run the valleys for our elders and children. Run, runner, run, let's run Runner's Mountain again. Say to make a run at Runner's Mountain might make a man face his own life is lost. Swallow Victor Galbraith in a 40-foot deep crevasse. He was one of 4 runners who never got message that due to bad weather the marathon was off. The third and final race became a rescue expedition. We run the mountain for our hometown and kin. We run the ridges for our mothers and children. Run, runner, run, let's run Runner's Mountain again. We run the mountain for our fathers and friends. We run the forest for our sweethearts and children. Run, runner, run, let's run Runner's Mountain.